The most persuasive people you've ever met never actually asked for what they wanted. Think about that for a second. The colleague who always gets buy-in, the person at the table who somehow shapes every decision without raising their voice, the friend whose suggestions always become the plan. They're not more charismatic than you. They're not more aggressive. They're operating on a different layer of communication entirely, one most people never even know exists. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly what that layer is, including the specific phrasing that makes it work almost automatically. Stay with me, because that part alone will change how you communicate forever. Here's a scenario you probably know. You want something, an approval, a commitment, a favor. So you build up to it, choose your moment, and ask. And the second the words leave your mouth, you feel it. That invisible wall. The person's energy shifts. Suddenly they're evaluating, weighing, looking for reasons to say no. Not because they dislike you, but because asking triggers resistance. It's almost biological. Psychologists call it reactance. The moment someone feels their freedom of choice is being pressured, even slightly, the mind recoils. The ask itself created the problem. So what do the truly persuasive people do differently? They don't ask, they frame. Pre-framing is the psychology of shaping how someone thinks before a decision is ever on the table. Not manipulation, architecture. You're building the mental environment the other person will think inside of before they even realize a choice is coming. Think of it like this. Imagine two doors. Behind one is a cold room, behind the other, warmth. A skilled pre-framer doesn't tell you which door to choose. They just make sure you're already slightly cold before you decide. The science behind this is rooted in priming, the proven psychological phenomenon where exposure to one stimulus influences the response to the next. When you prime the right emotional or conceptual state in someone's mind, their yes doesn't feel like a decision, it feels like a conclusion they reached themselves. And that's the key. People don't resist their own conclusions. Here's the counterintuitive part. The more obvious your persuasion attempt is, the less it works. But the more invisible it feels, the more powerful it becomes. This isn't about hiding your intentions. It's about leading with context instead of request. Now, here's how to actually use this. First, establish shared reality before making any move. Open with what you both already agree is true. Common ground lowers cognitive defenses immediately. Second, anchor the value before the ask exists. Talk about the outcome, the result, the benefit in a way that makes your eventual request feel like the logical path to something they already want. Third, use identity priming. People act in alignment with how they see themselves. Saying, "You're someone who thinks long-term" before a conversation about investment, financial or personal, subtly activates that identity. The decision that follows will try to match it. Fourth, frame the alternative as the effortful choice. Not manipulation, just honest contrast. When your option looks like the natural, easier path, resistance dissolves. And fifth, the phrasing that ties it all together. Instead of, "Would you be open to?" try, "I figured you'd probably already be thinking about this, but..." That single line presupposes agreement. It implies they're already leaning your way, and the mind, rather than argue, just leans. Here's what this really means for you. You've been taught that influence requires boldness, that you need to push, pitch, convince, but the deepest form of persuasion is quiet. It shapes the room before anyone sits down. You don't need to be louder, you need to be earlier. The person who frames the context wins the conversation before it starts.